Okay, hello. This will be a short lecture on funeral practices and memorial rituals, and then a little bit more on rituals and micro-rituals in general. So there are three tasks associated with funeral rituals specifically. So first is some sort of body care, right? As we learned in our culture PowerPoint, all cultures, religions have some appropriate forms of body care, whether that's burial, cremation, a pyre, and that's been appropriate for their time in history. Secondly, memorial rituals are to give us a sense of reality, maybe finality, working towards that closure, which some people say never happens. We'll talk more about that in upcoming lectures. And then they also help us think about what we're taking from this loved one's life and carrying forward. And I think many of the memorial services I've been to have done a great job of helping us remember not just their death, but their entire life, whether that's eulogies or slideshows or stories. And so what are the lessons we're learning from their lives that we're integrating into our own? Traditionally in the United States, we've had, like, if you're not Jewish, embalming. Remember, Jewish doesn't do embalming. So preparation of the body, a viewing of the body in a casket, and then typically a funeral service that maybe has the body present in a casket, and maybe there's something in a church, and then traveling to the graveside to have the body, buried in the ground or in a mausoleum or a crypt. But things are changing a lot in the United States, and so now we're often having memorial or celebration of life services where there isn't a body present. We're not going to the gravesite to bury because maybe there isn't a burial. It's going to be a cremation or something else. We also have people not doing ceremonies in churches, doing them outdoors or in homes. And as we're going to be talking about, we're going to see, we see more green burial options. This graph also just shows that cremation has been rapidly increasing in the United States. A lot of that is due to cost, but it also can be decreased stigma and personal preference. Okay, so green burial. This picture is of my family visiting the Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery in Florida. That's my mom on the left and the rest of us on the right. One holiday season a number of years ago, my mom said, I've decided that I want to be, buried later out here when I die at the Prairie Creek Conservation Ceremony, and I want you all to kind of come check it out and see how it works. And so we all traveled out there, and I'll tell you more about that visit. But green burial sites like this that are part of conservation land are a way to both kind of have a natural or green burial, and they conserve the land. So you can use the money that you get from burials to help support the cost of the land and, keep it natural and prevent it from being developed. In this conservation cemetery, for example, people aren't buried in caskets. They're put into simple compostable shrouds, like a linen shroud. They're brought in in a hand cart, not in a gas-powered or electric vehicle. The grave is hand dug. It's not dug with machinery. And you can see this is us standing around a grave where someone was buried. The dirt is then mounded up because, as the body decomposes, it'll collapse, and so then it'll reach surface level. There are no artificial or kind of man-made, human-made markers, but instead you can use natural kind of products to mark. I guess the wood bench there in the other picture is kind of human-made, but you're kind of using natural means, and also native plants around the grave. So these can often reduce costs because you're not paying for expensive caskets or concrete vaults and maybe higher costs in cemeteries. So this is a relatively new option, or new options that are developing, and especially this one here in Colorado around body composting. We weren't the first state, but it has been recently legalized in our state. The first person was composted beginning in September 2021 in Colorado, and that was completed in March 2022. So you can here that it's around 6 months. It can be faster. The body is placed in a wooden vessel like what you see in the picture, with layers of wood chips, alfalfa, and straw that help kind of break it down. And then after the composting is complete, about a cubic yard of soil remains, which is returned to the family or donated to farms. Colorado law prohibits using the soil to grow food for human consumption or selling the soil. So it's can typically be used for gardens, flowers, things like that. There's a great video clip if you want to watch that about kind of the process here in Colorado. Alkaline hydrolysis, I believe we're doing this for both animals, pets, for example, and humans. This is a cremation, kind of a cremation process that uses water, alkaline chemicals, heat, sometimes some pressure and agitation to accelerate natural decomposition. You can see that it's really fast, 3 to 6 hours. What's left is some bone fragments and a neutral liquid that they call effluent. And so the effluent is sterile. It contains salts, sugars, amino acids, and peptides, no tissue or DNA. And so this can be discharged with other wastewater, and the family could have kind of a sample of that if they wanted to do something kind of ceremonial with it. So I don't know if you've had any experiences in your personal life with talking to loved ones prior to death about their wishes. Obviously it can be a difficult conversation, especially if you're the one trying to bring that up. But I think it can be really worthwhile. So I have some vivid memories of my mom doing this with my grandmother in the last visit that we had to her when she was dying of cancer. My mom just basically showed up with, I think she gave her a heads up, like, Lois, sometime while we're here, I know this would be hard to talk about, but I'd love to get your wishes for a funeral or memorial service and how you want things handled. So she had some time to think about it, and then, I just remember my mom sitting there with a clipboard asking her a lot of questions, some of which you'll be asked in the 5 wishes document. So it can help kind of guide those conversations about how do you want your body cared for? Where do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? If so, do you want your cremains buried, scattered, kept? Do you want a memorial service? What kind of things do you have in mind for that, right? Are there specific songs? Do you want donations made in memory of something specifically? And some people even go so far as to write an obituary, which, can really ease the stress for family members, kind of following the death when there's a lot that they need to do. So I don't know what your experiences were during COVID. I went to several funeral or memorial services, one that was outside and socially distant, one that was inside, socially distant and live streamed, and another one that was just inside and socially distant. Initially, you may recall that funeral gatherings were limited, or all gatherings were limited to no more than 10 when we were in lockdown. And so that really created some challenges for funerals. And we also know that because of hospital, visitation rules during COVID, many people were dying alone instead of having maybe family members there with them. We didn't have the visitation options. People postponed services. We also had, drive-by funerals, kind of like we had some drive-by graduations. Some of these changes were probably, good. Now that we can live stream funerals, that really helps for people who would have a hard time traveling but would want to be a part, or because family members couldn't come in as easily or safely to funeral homes, they had to move all their planning and pricing online, which actually is pretty useful. Just a quick story about a friend of mine whose dad died during COVID and how her experience was impacted. Her dad died. He had been dying, living with her at home because she'd gotten him out of the assisted living facility when, COVID was kind of blazing through those. But he'd been having kind of reoccurrent bladder infections, and one of them landed him in the hospital. And my friend Laura wasn't expecting that he was going to die then, although he was technically dying, of cancer. And visitation was restricted, and so she wasn't able to be there as much as she wanted to be, and he ended up dying in the hospital kind of unexpectedly as a result of this bladder infection. They performed CPR because I don't think they expected him to die. He didn't have a DNR order. And so she got a call that he had died. She showed up at the hospital, and I think because things were so chaotic, there was no one to meet her. There was no one to prepare her. She's a social worker by training, and so she noticed what was missing, and she basically was just pointed in the direction of his room. And when she walked in, it was just a mess. Clearly, they had performed CPR and then had to run off to some other emergency, and so his body wasn't prepared for her to view. Nothing looked peaceful. It was pretty distressing. And then her funeral home story was she was kind of talking with the funeral home, dropping off clothes for him to be dressed in. They called her and asked she wanted him clean shaven, and she said yes, that's how he usually liked it. She was planning to do a small viewing with her young girls and her husband, and when they showed up to see her dad and they walk into this room, it is another man's body in the casket wearing her dad's clothes, and they had actually shaved the intentional facial hair off another man. And so how horrible that was. It was just, so overwhelming and unexpected. And I think that those were the kinds of mistakes that were happening during COVID that created for more complicated kind of grieving experiences. So now let's just move beyond funeral and memorial rituals and talk about rituals in general. So as a grief counselor, I was often brainstorming with people about, what would be a nice way to honor their loved one based on characteristics of their loved one, who they were, or what felt right for the individual themselves. We actually just had lists like what I've got coming on upcoming slides of possible ideas that people could look at. You can probably find those online as well. And so this is basically putting action to our grief, leaning into our grief, which we'll be talking about more as something helpful when we're grieving. Just some examples here, we can have rituals to acknowledge and mourn the loss. This might be just things like, being outside in a special place and thinking of your loved one, maybe where they used to walk the dog or where they like to go. Looking at photos, rereading letters. You can also have rituals to symbolize what you have gained from the person. So maybe how you're using an inheritance to promote your career, or like my mom did, build a swimming pool since her grandpa had taught her and her siblings how to swim. You could have rituals to symbolize moving on. And this might be when you're kind of cleaning out the house, right? And you're packing up all but a few items, and you're telling stories to one another and honoring your loved one as you go. Here's the first of a few slides with lists of ideas, and so I won't read through all of these, and I'll let you read them through, and you might be thinking of specific examples as well. But sometimes what I would do when I was a grief counselor is I would talk to people about what the hardest times of the day were for them, and then we would construct little micro rituals around that time. So maybe if they said, it's so hard for me when I wake up and when I come home, then we'd think about something you can do right when you wake up that would honor them, honor your grief, right? It could be just talking to them and saying, I hate having to go through the day without you. It could be saying a prayer for them. It could be the way that you make your coffee. Could be standing outside for a second, looking out the window. And then what about rituals when you come home? That's when grief can hit people hard after they've kind of been on during the day. And so sometimes for people it was like, I'm going to put up some twinkle lights, and when I come home I'm going to turn them on, or I'm going to light a candle, or I'm going to play this song. So just even little things to put feelings into action. Other examples here on this list, I want to just say a little bit about doing something special with cremains. And one idea is to scatter or bury the cremains in a special place that you can visit. I have found, for example, for my husband, that that's been a useful part of his grieving process. His dad died, more than a decade ago, and he scattered his cremains up by Arthur's Rock here in Fort Collins. And so when he's missing his dad, He'll go on a mountain bike ride or a trail run, and he'll stop and sit on a rock up there and just think about his dad. It gives him a way to take action. Other people, might put up a bench or a cross by the side of the road or a sculpture or do something in their own garden, right? That just is a special place, that is a way of honoring their loved one. A few more, lots of creative ideas here. If you have young kids, working with them, or if they're too young, doing it on your own, to make a memory book for them, for a child or a grandchild, so that they can remember this loved one, as they get older. So I want to go beyond death rituals to think about non-death losses. We're going to be talking more about non-death losses in our grief processes lecture, but basically anytime we have transition or change in our lives, even if it's a wanted change like graduating, it comes with loss. And so rituals can be used for, or micro rituals can be used for all types of transition or loss. And so I want you to just be thinking, what do you have? Have you had informal, small, silly rituals that you've done? It can be things like getting your hair cut, or anytime I've moved, I've made a list of all the things that I was going to miss about the place that I was leaving. A recent example in my own life is we're doing an addition on our house, and they recently took down the wall between the old house and the new house. And right near the wall was this chair. We called it the blue chair. That my daughter often sat in with our cat, who died a little over a year ago. And when she was younger, I often sat in it and held her when she was upset. That was one of our little rituals, basically. Like, I would say, do you want me to hold you in the chair? She would say yes. And so we were out to dinner the night before the wall came down. She's almost 17, and she said, I'm sad that the wall's coming down. And we're having to move the chair, and it's never going to be there again in that same spot. And I have such memories about the chair. And I think when we get home, I want you to hold me in the chair. And so that's what I did for like 15 minutes. I haven't probably held her in a chair for 3 or 4 years, but it was really sweet. And we talked about Pippi, our cat, and just the memories that we had in that space that was going to no longer exist. Another quick example is I do my own version of a 4 directions prayer, especially when I just need a little bit of grounding. I live near City Park in Fort Collins, and when I'm on the way back from a run, I'll run up to the top of City Park Hill, and I'll turn and face in each direction and think of something to kind of ground me. So I face east, and I think of all the people who have supported me in life. I face north, and I ask for wisdom, specifically to not say anything dumb in classes. I face south, and I ask for humor and levity, because sometimes when I get stressed, I can get really serious. And then I face west, and I think about where I'm headed in life and who I'm going there with. One last example, I had a friend break up a number of years ago. It was really painful for me, and so one of my little rituals was I just gathered some symbolic objects, a flower, an art print, a little tiny sculpture, and I just put them on my desk, and it was just my way of looking over and acknowledging this loss. Another example of a ritual around a non-death loss was when my son left for college, and I had heard from my friends that moving into the dorm sometimes was a disappointing goodbye, because there was a lot of logistics happening, and maybe your kid just met their roommate and they weren't going to be all emotional and cry in front of you. They just were kind of overwhelmed. And so I decided that I wanted us to have a family rituals a couple of days before Isaac even went to college. And so this is how I constructed it. I ran it basically like I run a face-to-face class, where I gave us all tasks to think about and then come back and share as the large group. But I did it around songs. And so I had 5 parts to it, and you can kind of see that there. I gave everybody in the family a notepad. And while we listened to the first song, Sweet Emotion, we just wrote down all the feelings we had about Isaac leaving. And then we listened, and then we shared some of those with the group. And then while we listened to Forever Young, we wrote down some of our favorite memories about Isaac's childhood, and we shared those. Then while we listened to Say by John Mayer, We wrote down our fears and hopes about this transition and this new stage of life, and we shared some of those. Then, listening to I'll Be There by Jess Glenn, we made a vow or a pledge to everybody in the family. It was a lot around the lines of how I'm going to be there for you during this time of transition, or how I'm going to allow you freedom, or whatever. And then we shared those, and then the last one was just gratitude. Thanks for Loving Me by Bon Jovi, and we just went around and shared a piece of gratitude for each person in the family. And what I found was, of course, I cried through this entire thing, but it helped me get all this emotion that had been building out, so that when we were on the move-in day and getting ready to move, I wasn't such a wreck. I could be just focused on that, supporting Isaac through that experience. So now that you've heard my examples, I'd encourage you to just think of some of your own. Think about the potential changes that you've got coming up. Maybe you've got graduation on the horizon. Maybe you're moving. So think about if there's some little things. It can be just having people over for dinner, going somewhere specific, just small things to kind of honor the change.